You're juggling it all: work, family, decisions, expectations, 6 hats, maybe more every single day. But behind the scenes, your body is running on stress, and stress left unchecked will lead to illness. I'm Dr. Shami, an integrated family doctor, and this is 6 Hats, the podcast that helps you understand what stress is doing to your body and what you can do about it now. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 6 Hats podcast. And today we're going to talk about pelvic floor exercises, but with a difference. So pelvic floor challenges are often met with silence, but they don't have to be. So in this inspiring episode, we sit down with Jenny Bourke, a certified hypopressive coach, which we're going to dive into what exactly that is, and who's also a Pilates instructor. Now, she shares a personal journey of overcoming pelvic organ prolapse through the power of hypopressive exercises. Now, Jenny not only opens up her own transformational journey after childbirth, but also guides us through what hypopressives are, how they differ from traditional core training, and why they can be life-changing for women navigating pelvic floor dysfunction. Along the way, she will shed light on the mental and emotional impact of prolapse, answer common questions about practice and results, and will empower listeners to reclaim confidence in their bodies through movement. So welcome, Jenny.
Thank you so much for having me, Shami.
I'm so excited my good friend Aoife in Ireland introduced us, because I'm always looking for there must be something better, something that's improving women's health, because we cannot just be stuck, especially when we're talking about prolapse. You know, what's remaining for them? Yes, they go and see a women's physio, they might be doing pelvic floor exercises, they might be considering surgery, but many, many women are actually suffering in silence and they've almost given up hope. So when I heard about what you're doing, but initially I was thinking, I actually don't know what hypopressives are, so which we're going to dive into. But the fact that you're helping so many women, this is so exciting. So Jenny, I think this is a great place to start, because everyone's thinking, what exactly does hypopressive mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Delighted to give you a little bit of an intro. So essentially, hypopressives are a breathing and postural technique, and they incorporate a vacuum breath. And it's that vacuum breath that helps to lift and rehabilitate and strengthen the pelvic floor. And then we do hypopressives in lots of different poses. So some of them are similar to a yoga pose or a Pilates pose. And that variety of poses is really key to symptom improvement as well. And the hypopressives technique can be so powerful for reducing prolapse symptoms, reducing incontinence, and just helping with other core pelvic floor dysfunction issues as well.
Amazing. So when did that all begin? Because I've not heard about it. Where did it all start?
Yeah, it's actually been around for about 40 years.
Oh,
And it was,
wow.
yeah, I know. And we're slowly gaining traction in the pelvic community, which is so exciting. And so many physios are starting to take an interest in hypopressives and recommending it as a technique to their patients as well, which is fantastic. But yeah, it's been around for about 40 years. It was developed by a physio called Marcel Cofres, and he was working with women in that early postnatal period who were struggling with pelvic floor dysfunction, but your traditional core exercises like planks, sit-ups, crunches, etc., they were increasing pressure in the pelvic floor and potentially making that pelvic floor dysfunction worse. So what he wanted to do was develop a technique that wouldn't increase pressure or put any more pressure down on the pelvic floor, but still rehabilitate these women. And hence hypopressives were born really in a formal capacity.
Amazing, amazing. And we're going to dive deeper and give our listeners much more in depth in what that actually looks like. But I'd love to hear your journey, Jenny. Like, how did you come across hypopressives?
Yeah, and it is a really personal story with my own experience with hypopressives. So I have two lovely children, so they are 6 and 8, and I was diagnosed with pelvic organ prolapse after the birth of my first child. And I was completely blindsided by it, completely devastated, felt like there was no way up and no way out. I think, potentially like a lot of women, I went into pregnancy and childbirth quite naively and potentially didn't understand that there may be lifelong ramifications from the birth. So when I was diagnosed, I was told never to run again and never to lift more than 7 kg. And that was for the rest of my life. which I just found mind blowing. And I really struggled with the mental side of it because I just felt like I wasn't going to be the mom I wanted to be. I wasn't going to be live the life that I wanted to lead. And that I felt like my life was going to be so curtailed by prolapse. And that was just my path. And I couldn't really do anything about it. So definitely struggled massively with the mental side and felt so negatively about my body, like I was broken, like I wasn't going to be the same again. And I think that was after the birth of my first child. I think then I knew I ideally wanted to have my children quite close together. So I almost parked it for a year or so and thought, look, I'll revisit once my family is complete. So once my son was about 9 months then, I thought, okay, I can't live like this anymore. And I really want to do something positive about it. So I was considering surgery at that point, and I went to see a lovely surgeon in Sydney, and he advised I'd be a great candidate for it. So I thought, okay, that's my first positive step, but I was still researching anything I could find about prolapse and recovery at the same time, and that's when I discovered hypopressives. So I thought, okay, I might as well try a less invasive recovery method first. And I thought I'll do the hypopressives and I can always revisit surgery at a later date if I need to. So I learned the hypopressives technique online in a 12-week program. And then by the end of the program, I had actually reduced my prolapse grade from a grade 2 to a grade 1. And I was back running, which was just mind blowing to me. I thought that was something I'd never be able to do again. And even now, when I go for a run, I'm so grateful that I'm able to do that again and have that freedom. So then through my own positive experience, I thought, well, I can't keep this to myself and I need to give other women hope and give them help and spread the word. So I retrained to become a hypopressives coach. And here we are today.
Amazing, amazing. I'm just going to backtrack a bit. Suddenly I realized not many people know what exactly is a prolapse. So we'll dive into that, but also what kind of symptoms women experience with prolapse and what that looks like. And when you said you couldn't carry more than 7 kilos, first thing that came to mind is you couldn't carry your baby.
Yeah.
Which is impossible as a mum.
It is. And I'm quite black and white. And if somebody says don't lift more than 7 kg, I didn't lift more than 7 kg. So to be really honest, I think it almost affected my relationship with my kids at the very beginning because I was so terrified of lifting them. And obviously they get really heavy really quickly. So I would always defer to my husband if there was lifting out of a car or lifting to a car or lifting out of a cot where I could. Obviously, I did have to lift them as well. And again, coming into that toddler phase, I just didn't lift them. And I found that completely heartbreaking. And even looking back, I think, gosh, I should have just lifted them. It mightn't have made anything worse. But I was so terrified of making things worse that I thought, well, I have to do everything I'm told, or I'm going to be in an even worse position than I was, at the beginning. And I think when you say about the symptoms, most of the prolapse symptoms, or maybe I can explain prolapse first, actually. So prolapse, a very basic explanation is when one or more of the pelvic organs, so your bowel, bladder, or uterus, is moved out of its original position. And it can start to descend towards the vaginal entrance or even externally outside of the vaginal entrance. And a lot of the common symptoms you might get with prolapse are this almost like a heavy, aching, dragging feeling internally, feeling like there's a bulge or like you're sitting on an egg, feeling like everything's going to fall out all of the time, feeling really unsafe in that way. And then obviously that curtails exercise and movement and all of those really important things that we need in our day-to-day life. And prolapse then can be accompanied with incontinence, and that can be that stress incontinence if you're lifting or jumping or running, or urge incontinence. So that's when maybe you're putting the key in the door when you're coming home and suddenly you feel like you absolutely, have to run to the loo.
Amazing, amazing. And it can also affect bowel movements.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the benefits of hypopressives as well, is it helps with constipation, and constipation can have a really negative effect on prolapse symptoms. So hypopressives helps to stimulate the bowel. So we're getting that urge to go, and then also helps to relax and release the pelvic floor so that when we are emptying our bowels, we're having a more complete bowel movement.
Wow, that makes so much sense. So let's get into hypopressives. And I loved how you demonstrated to me, and it just made such clear sense. So how do you create this increased pressure, abdominal area?
Yeah, well, it's less of an increase in pressure, and we're creating this vacuum effect in
That's
the
it.
abdominal area. Yeah. So I'll give you a bit of a brief overview of maybe a 1, 2, 3 in terms of doing the technique. Obviously, this is an audio, so everyone will be able to see what I'm doing. But essentially, with hypopressives, what we're doing is we're utilizing this 360-degree breath. And if you've done Pilates before, you might have heard of a lateral breath or a 360-degree breath. All that is meaning that when we're inhaling, we're expanding the rib cage and really breathing into the sides and back of the rib cage. So with the hypopressives technique, we generally have 3 cycles of breath. So we breathe in through the nose, we breathe out through the mouth. We do that 3 times. After the last exhale, we close our mouth, we hold our breath out, and then we stretch our ribs out to the side. And it's that rib stretch that creates that, what looks like that hollowing out in the abdominal area and the lift of the pelvic floor. So it's almost like the diaphragm is acting like a plunger, lifting everything up with it. And then we do that breathing, that specific breathing and vacuum in lots of different poses.
Right. And when you hold that breath in and create that vacuum, how long do you keep that breath?
Yeah, so in the beginning, when I'm teaching beginners, we'd hold it for 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then you would gradually build up to say a count of 8 to 10. And in general, that's plenty. You hold for 8 to 10, and then you move on to the next pose.
Wow. So you give them a series of poses.
Yeah. So in the program that I teach, there's about 20 different poses. So there's lots of different poses, and then there's different arm movements within those poses as well. And that variety of poses is really key to symptom improvement. So not just doing hypopressives in lying or in standing, but in that wide array of poses so that you're getting the most benefit out of the technique. And obviously through the different poses, we're bringing the pelvic floor, the diaphragm and the pelvic floor through different ranges of movement as well, and almost mimicking in some way everyday life and the actions and the postures that we would be in everyday life.
So an exercise sort of routine would take about half an hour?
Not even. That's the good news. 15 minutes. So the general recommended practice that we would say is 15 minutes, 6 days a week. So ideally, if your schedule permits and your kids aren't getting up too early, first thing in the morning, so that you're done and dusted, life doesn't get in the way, and it almost sets you up for the day as well.
Amazing. So it sounds so achievable, so non-invasive, almost too good to be true, Jenny. So when do you start seeing results in your clients?
Yeah. And look, obviously, everyone is very different. But in general, women would start noticing positive effects in and around that 4 to 6 week mark. So that might be, I usually notice my prolapse first thing in the morning, and it was actually lunchtime by the time I noticed it today. Or I had to run for the bus or run after my toddler and I didn't leak, or I didn't feel like everything was going to fall out. So those are some of the positive. So that 4 to 6 week mark is generally when we've done the introductory poses, and that generally women will notice an improvement then. And then again, in and around that 8 to 10 week mark, when we've brought in more of the advanced poses, another set of improvements. And the way we work as well is we monitor symptoms throughout the program. So we'll do a symptom screen at the beginning to see your baseline, midway through, and then again at the end, so that you can really see where you were at the beginning and how far you've come. So I think a lot of the time as well, we almost forget symptoms as they gradually dissipate. And then it's really interesting to go back with a client to their starting point and think, well, you scored a 10 here and now you're saying it's a 0, or you scored an 8 here and now it's only a 4. And sometimes they're actually quite amazed how bad things were and how much things have improved, because you tend to forget as you progress.
And often it's normalized for many years. Bad the symptoms are. You're spot on. It's interesting, isn't it? When you get better, you just completely block out the part of those awful symptoms and you sort of move on with life. Now, that's amazing, Jenny. So is this something a woman can do? They're contemplating surgery. They want to try something different. Do they do this with a pelvic physio? How does it work?
Yeah, great question. So I'm not trained to do any internal examinations, so it's brilliant. So firstly, I would always recommend, if a client came to me and hadn't been to a pelvic floor physio, I would always recommend that they go to see one so that they're getting a full diagnosis and that the physio is able to do those internal examinations to understand exactly what's going on. So they're almost like my eyes on the inside. It's brilliant if I'm working with a client who's also working with a pelvic floor physio at the same time. And they can give them that feedback as well. They can see, maybe they're using an ultrasound machine, maybe they're doing internal examinations. So they can see the benefits of hypopressives as we progress through. And I think it's important to note as well that it's not hypopressives either or with pelvic floor physio or with Kegels. They can absolutely complement each other. And we would find that some women will benefit from a combination of pelvic floor exercises and hypopressives. Some women may do better with hypopressives alone. So it's quite case by case for women. I think with pelvic floor exercises or with women who are potentially struggling with a hypertonic pelvic floor or a tight pelvic floor, sometimes these women can't actually tolerate any more pelvic floor exercises. So hypopressives is a really powerful way of still rehabilitating these women, but releasing tension rather than adding any tension to the pelvic floor.
Fantastic. And who do you see? Who are your common clients? Those who've tried surgery, tried maybe Botox injections, tried medication. Who do you see come through?
Yeah, a real mix. So I often have clients who they feel like they've tried everything and nothing has worked for them. And they're thinking, well, I might as well give hypopressives a go. I've tried everything else. So I often have those clients. And then I do get some clients who they may be in that really early postnatal period. They're Googling and hypopressives comes up and they think, okay, that's what I'm going to do first. And, often under the care of a pelvic floor physio as well.
Fantastic. So we talked about postnatal, but what about perimenopause and menopause? Is this something that women can do as a preventative as well?
Yeah. So the two main clients I would see are those postnatal clients. And when I say postnatal, probably up to 0 to 10 years postnatal maybe. And then that menopausal and perimenopausal. So potentially women who they may have had a prolapse for 20 years when they had their children, but they've been completely asymptomatic and it's given them zero issues. And then they start to get into that menopause or perimenopausal period, and suddenly they're starting to notice adverse symptoms with their prolapse, or maybe they've started leaking. So yes, those would be the two main camps that the clients would fit into. In terms of preventative, whilst I don't know if there's been any specific research as a preventative method, it's definitely putting you in the best spot. Even things like breathing optimally and allowing your core to function more optimally, that's definitely going to benefit you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Jenny. I think it was a brilliant insight into something so different. I was blown away by the fact it's been around for 40 years. It's so funny, isn't it? How this information takes a while to spread.
Absolutely.
And women need to have more choices for sure. So where can people find you?
Yeah, so either Instagram or my website is probably the easiest way. So my Instagram is hypopressives_with_Jenny. And then my website is hypopressiveswithjenny.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Shami.
Thanks for listening to Six Hats, where it's all about progress, not perfection. If this episode spoke to you, don't wait, hit follow now, leave a quick review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Want to take your next step today? Download my ebook. The link is waiting in the show notes. And remember, this is general advice only. Always speak to your practitioner for anything medical. See you next time.